This is Dean from D. Carson CPA. I promised this would happen. We'd have to put together a slide, the missing PSA. The reason for the missing PSA is because no one stepped up to say what should be fairly obvious, but is an underspoken line about the needs in a civil society for the connection of individuals and families and communities, which together form a civil society, in our constitutional republic, and with the structure of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, which have long been with us since inception, and the condition of rule of law which bonds civil society. It's a framework that is imperfect, but is in the construction of citizens working together to define what their expectations are when individuals and families come to communities. And interesting to note, we can have different views amongst individuals, and when individuals meet communities, it should be a collective view to the views of the communities and the wrong and the right, and it should be the evolution of law through executive, legislative, and judicial processes it is in the states over years and years of determining what are the expectations of the group. No two people think precisely alike, so we all have generally different views. But in order that we can live together in a cohesive society where this group falls under the bell-shaped curve in the majority, we need to define a set of rules that we can live by in order to society. And you cannot be in the executive, the legislative, or judicial branch of government anywhere in these United States, in a city, in a town, in a state, or in the federal government if you don't understand the connection of how laws and rules are made with executive, legislative, and judicial branches in the action. And a very good thing to go read, if you're thinking about the federal level and how things are evolved underneath that, is go read Ben's Guide to Government, which is a U.S. government guide. Talks about how our federal government works, and then understand that locales like New York City and states may function a little different, but in the end, come on, it's the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch function together, making rule of law. Now, we had to take our time and carefully put this pronouncement out there. I myself am a big believer in the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule is stronger than what's written, but it's incorporated in what's written too. It's the source code that went into the Constitution Declaration saying all men being created equal, where in that time men was the definition of something different. We've evolved it today to be man, woman, and all people. But in my world, it's the Golden Rule. And that's just you being the best you can be and helping out and not looking at people's differences based on color, based on gender, based on if they're rich or poor, sick or healthy. You're looking at people. And responsibility for Americans is to help other Americans and think about everyone's got value. And some people don't think that way, and it's a shame. But I can't work with the idea that you're not going to be focused on that line. If you're not going to think that all people have value, we can't really have a logical conversation, because then we get into the conversation of who has value and who doesn't. And in this conversation, we're talking about citizens, and everyone has value. And then there's the context of how things get put together. There's a bell-shaped curve, which represents the rule of law in a civil society. The majority of citizens, which include all professions and working people, mom and dad, grandpas, grandmas, the young kids, and relatives, aunts and uncles, everybody, the majority lives under this bell-shaped curve. On the left tail of the bell-shaped curve, we have a type 2 outlier. I'm just calling it that for this. It's not scientific, but I do have a type 1 and a type 2 here. But the type 2 outlier is one with negligible compliance. So if we say the bell-shaped curve representing compliance with the rule of law, the majority of persons comply with it because they understand we live in a civil society with a structure of executive, legislative, and judicial branches. ELJ, if you want to keep it simple and remember it, into the rule of law. And then type 1 over here is ultra compliance. That's your people who are really charged up, and they, every single thing they're going to, it's people that are really, how do I explain it? Ultra compliance is what it is. It's ultra compliance. These are people that are really on the scale and hard way this way. And they're the counterweight, the physics counterweight of what's over here, which is type 2 people, which is negligible compliance, non-compliance. Now, if it was that it's only human behavior, and if the rule is as simple as, maybe the old laws about jaywalking where you can't cross a street when it's not your light and stuff, they're still in the book somewhere, then maybe that's, a simple place to talk about it. But the problem is that the whole purpose of my preparing this, which is not a legal analysis, it's just a social analysis, is that society functions in an order of laws and rules, okay? Everything you and I do, everything an electrician does, everything a plumber does, everything a bus driver does, Everything a shop owner does, anything anyone does, has some degree of structures of laws, rules, manuals, forms, filings, and some numbers behind it. The reason that I'm connected to these things is because invariably when you make a decision, there's probably a financial, legal, technical, and teamwork point. And this talks a lot about teamwork and the kind of divisive stuff that's going on now. For who knows whatever reason, someone's out there thinking it's a good idea to put Americans against Americans and split them on basis of different characteristics. They might want to divide you because you're a woman, put a woman against a man. They might want to divide you because our skin color is different, so they want to put you against me or me against you. They might want to put you against me because you're rich and I'm poor, or I'm poor and you're rich. And they might want to, or I'm rich and you're poor, whatever it is. And then they might want to put us against each other because, I'm sick, you're healthy, I'm sick. There's a lot of dividing going on, where the most important thing, especially in a national health crisis and national economic crisis, is finding ways to work together. But instead of getting that, what we get is a handful of leaders who have come through the executive, legislative, and judicial branch lines, or they should have learned about it. If you're a lawyer, you've gone to law school, you maybe did a clerkship at the judge's lines, and if not, believe me, if you got the government and you're working in the executive branch, you understand there's an executive, legislative, and judicial branch. So therefore, if you get into those lines, and you're talking about, law enforcement versus citizens, you're making up a whole bunch of malarkey. Sorry for the old-fashioned term, but you've got citizens here, right? That's who lives here, citizens. Citizens covered under the rule of law, which is our Constitution, and the local and state equivalents that add to that. But no state law may run contrary to the Constitution, as we learn in social research. None of this is legal. It's all based on social research. So be aware, it's not a legal context, but you could probably map this back with attorneys' help to legal terms if you wanted to and if you needed to. Okay, so now into these lines, understanding that citizens have jobs and they have families. Those are pretty much the fundamental things they have. Beyond that, they have hobbies, things they like to do, things they don't like to do. And as you look in citizens, you could have the restaurant people, the mail people, you could have the store people, the bodega people, and the grocery store people keeping us all alive, logistics people running those trucks, and agriculture people out there working and bringing the groceries. And then you'd have law enforcement too, because they have a job, and it's just a title of a job of a citizen. And so when people start dividing in here, what you got is people talking about a job title that they'd like to treat poorly based on a job title, and ignore that these people are also citizens and family members. And there's the other side of it too. There's people you got over here, type 2, outliers with negligible compliance. And that's a nice way to say it. You could also have some very nasty characters in there. In that line there, you could have some nasty characters who believe it's okay to go out and commit violent acts, to rob, steal, to maim, and to hurt, and they're okay with that. And they're not the ordinary person. They're not you and me, and the average majority is sitting here in the middle who are a little bit good, a little bit bad, not perfect. And they're not these people here, the law enforcement people that go out and have to deal with a lot, have to see a lot, and in ultra compliance, you have both citizens that are super compliant, they're absolutely to dot the I's and cross the T's, which is hard to do, but they do that. And there's also law enforcement that goes out and they see the challenges, and most law enforcement would be in here, but you're going to have people who are really charged up working in law enforcement, working corrections, because this is humanity. Humanity is a scale, and humanity is a scale which includes the majority, we hope, in a bell-shaped curve, outliers to the left, negligible, non-compliant, outliers to the right, and willful non-compliant over the left, and on the right, ultra-compliant, which could mean super hardcore on enforcing the laws and rules, super hard in the takedowns, or just citizens that are really dotting the I's and crossing the T's. It's okay. It's human nature. It runs a line from here to there. But on both ends of the curve, you can have a situation where you can have extremes. And the next slide I'm going to talk about is de-risking what I call the highly, intense human process of an arrest, because there's a lot of risk, because there's adrenaline, there's fear factor, there's connecting people with the system. But part of what I'm trying to do here is get back to basics, because there's a missing PSA out there, and the next slide will bring that all together. But I am so disappointed that no one just brought it back to these simple things. To re-educate, it's a point of civics that must be missing, and if people are getting away with having conversations about this, and people have to kowtow to explain things, well, that just shows you the information's not getting out there, so it's worth the time. Follow for the next slide, please.